I decided to take the first photo walk of the year along a path we regularly tread together near Brimpton. Happy New Year.
The Photo Walk is brought to you by mpb.com. Quality used photo and video kit. Buy, sell, trade, create at mpb.com.
And this year, I'm looking forward to doing some test drives with MPB. We're going to be trying out some different kit that's been sent by MPB for us to try out. A test drive, if you will. And, first on my shopping list, in inverted commas, of test driving is surely something, a camera that starts with the letter L and has a big red badge on the front. You know, the one that I salivate about. Anyway, that's to come this year. Some MPB adventures. We were at some friends for New Year's Eve, and inevitably the conversation, as soon as the clock struck 12 and we clinked our glasses, the chat turned to what resolutions and plans we all had. And, I not so much froze, because that would be a bit melodramatic, but really I'd given it no thought at all. So amongst the really laudable, impressive, grand plans that started to rebound around the room, when it came to me, I just looked a bit vacant and blurted out the first three words I could think of, which was drink more water, with a question mark. And it seemed to me that I got the very same response Deep Thought got, the supercomputer, in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when it revealed after millions of years of thinking about the answer to life, the universe and everything, it had come up with an answer. That answer being 42. Is that it? The friends in the room said, a kind of echo with the Hitchhiker's story there. I wondered how long it would take you, Neil, to mention Hitchhikers. It's only been, 2 minutes? Well, you know, one of my favourite books. But that was it, yes, drink more water. That was the only thing I could think of. And so far, by the way, I have drunk more water. Seems to be a fairly easy resolution. I don't know why I didn't think of that one before. I think I will from now limit all resolutions to, would it be a triptych? It wouldn't be a triptych, would it? It's 3 words, but that's not really a triptych. I'm just trying desperately to shoehorn a photographic term in. But 3 connected words, if you like. Kind of limit the complexity of my plans. Things like be much kinder, take cold showers, read Philip Larkin, and wait for it, you'll like this one, appreciate making pictures. And perhaps that one is the most apposite of them all, because if I learned one thing from last year, as we start up again this year, 2023, it was this, that we're really very, very lucky to have this thing, the camera, or the photography really, in our lives. This once alchemic box of magic is no longer the dark art preserve of the few. It's a skeleton key to wonder and adventure and solace and well-being and, steady on, Neil. It's only Jan 6. You're pitching too high. No, I don't think so. I mean it. I mean, if there was a common thread from all my guests of 22, it was that when they're making pictures, notwithstanding the inevitable picture maker's block from time to time that we've all had, in the main, looking through that eyepiece, figuratively for some, is a really precious through-the-looking-glass experience, isn't it? And my guest, New York street photographer Ruben Radding, completely gets that too, and feels the same way, it would seem.
Today on the Photo Walk.
I feel really transformed, and that's when that feeling of connection to everything happens. It's very, very similar to what people say they get out of something like Zen meditation or even some forms of physical exercise. Even people I know who are runners can describe having very similar kind of experience.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today we're joined as you and I walk by Ruben Radding in this unique and special kind of photography show. Unique because you write it with your letters, with your thoughts and your pictures that you share and special because we get to spend time together making our photos, while those letters and guests, both present and past, inspire with thoughts about photography and life. It's a show about how making pictures has you feel, what it does for us and others around us. A gentle respite from the rough and tumble of the everyday. In the mailbag and on the show today then, seeing in a new way the simple ideas that are probably the most profound ones. Your own doorstep is a rich ground for making pictures. The first of the new monthly assignments now that the assignments has moved from the Monday show to Fridays. It's set by our final guest of 22 actually, Alex Ward. We embrace doing family candids, reading books instead of social feeds. And I'm going to leave you with such a stack of films and websites to follow on the show page today that you'll feel like you've been set homework. The kind of homework, though, that's fun. Not the sort that has you labouring over, the periodic table of chemistry, trying to look for anything out of the window that might distract. Oh, look, a squirrel! Anyway, nearly 7 billion people on this planet are able to make a photograph with something and record life. So we're not walking alone, documenting our place and time in this world. So, coffee, Garibaldi's, walking boots on, let's walk. Right, first letter in a moment, but I want to get my sketchbook shot. The photograph that says where I am today. As I say, it's a fairly regular haunt of photo walks. A place that I like coming to. It's quite a quiet walk. Nobody really comes along here, so it's just me, you, microphone, and our cameras. So here we go. This path here. Let me put your letters down. It's a kind of a grey. Well, it's not kind of. It is a grey day today. It's not a very inspiring day weather-wise. There's a hint just behind me. A hint of sunshine maybe burning through a cloud above me, but nothing else really. Right, what are we doing here? I'm on my Fujifilm X Pro 1 today. Everything's manually set up. I've got my Samyang 12mm lens on, wide-angle lens, 250th f/5.6. I'm using focus peaking to focus, and I'm going to put the sort of vanishing point of the path ahead of me right in the centre of the frame. Nothing big, nothing clever, but it does say I was here. Right, pick up your letters. First one. Who do we go to for the start of 2023? I think we should go to Hegard the Dane. Lars, how are you? Happy New Year to you. He says, hello Neil, a New Year's greeting instead of a Christmas card. December was not without practical challenges. Firstly, the entire household was without internet for 2 weeks due to an error of my service provider. Limited bandwidth at a time with the Football World Cup and daily Christmas cereals sent me into the offline content of my life, books. And when I was subsequently hit by COVID and almost slept for 5 days in a row, the offline content, my Kindle app, became my best friend too. The whole sorry story, though, resulted in a lot of inspirational reading. I reread one of my favourite books, Gregory Heisler's 50 Portraits. I know you have the book and are fascinated by the cover. I am, Lars. And actually, it's quite timely, your letter, because it's what with the books coming back for the Extra Mile show, which I'll tell you a bit more about later on. That's one of the books I think we should go visit, definitely. Anyway, says Lars, I'm sure you'll share my fascination with the book that had me return to 50 Portraits. It's a book called A Show of Hands by a photographer called Tim Booth. I needed inspiration for a 2023 photo project, and so I've now ordered a signed copy. Oh, get you, Lars. A signed copy, huh? Do you get twice the inspiration when the book is signed? The book, by the way, I'll come back to your letter in a moment, Lars, but the book and all the names and websites I'm mentioning here are going to be on the corresponding show page today, with photographs by Ruben Radding as well. And I think you're going to be spending quite a lot of time. There's quite a lot of, is it rabbit warrens or rabbit holes? What is the phrase? You're going to be leaping off in all directions. There's films on Vimeo and YouTube. There's websites. There's books to go and look at. The show page today has a plethora of links for you to enjoy. But the Show of Hands, that book, wow. Have you ever had one of those oh, what a great idea, I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd invented that moments? I'm sure you have, because this book, The Show of Hands, that is definitely one of those, oh, what a great idea, why did I not think of that? It's like highly priced coffee shops, isn't it? Oh, why didn't I think of that? Oh, I mean, honestly, you can stand in the corner, back towards the customer. They can't quite see what you're doing. You're stirring some instant mix into the mug. Then you make some noises and gurgling noises. Stir it all up a little bit more. Maybe move around in a kind of dancey fashion. Pour some milk in from a great height. And there we go. Et voila. A death by mocha with marshmallow topping and hand-shaped chocolate dusting in the shape of a human skull. £34.20, please. That's what I mean by, oh, why didn't I think of that moment? And A Show of Hands is just that sort of thing for me. It is certainly the, oh, why did I not think of that, of the photographic world for me. Pictures of hands. And you might think, well, pictures of hands, Neil? It's not very inspiring, but honestly, go look at these pictures of hands. Black and white, stunning photographs of the, I suppose you could describe it as the most powerful tool that we have, isn't it? Our hands. And they are just incredible pictures. They're contrasty. Can a picture of a hand be moody? Yes, they're moody. You can see every vein, every Neil, you're not really selling this to me now. No, honestly, it's just gorgeous. Let me quote a few words. I'll come back to your letter in a moment, Lars. I do apologise, I've gone off on one here. But let me quote a few words from a film that shows the book that I'm going to put on the show page today. These words are from Tim Booth, who made the pictures and the project. He said the variation, the depth of people's hands, the unbelievable strength and ruggedness of others just captivated me, really, and I just can't stop photographing them. Now, tell me you don't feel the same way as me. Now, I don't know, Neil, I've not seen the pictures yet. Well, promise me this. Go and look at A Show of Hands. Go and look at the pictures. Look them up online. Better still, go buy the book. And if you feel fairly flush this year already, maybe, then the signed one. Like what Lars did in Denmark land. But you know what I like most about this? It's the fact that Tim didn't plan to make this book. He didn't wake up one day with this grand master plan to do a portrait book about hands. No. He was visiting his grandmother, and he always takes a camera around with him. Here's a lesson, yeah? Always carry a camera. And he was with his grandmother, visiting his grandmother, and he noticed her hands, which he asked to photograph. Now, she wasn't exceptionally pleased about it at first, because she was self-conscious about her arthritic hands and them being looped together. But he made this picture, and he comments in the film as well that you'll see that this was his granny. And from that photograph, this incredible, beautiful project was born. A Show of Hands. Fantastic. Anyway, sorry, Lars. Back to you, my friend. From Faces and Hands, I went next to a book called Light, Gesture and Colour by Jay Maisel, another photographer I've found much inspiration and learning from. His use of colour is fascinating, and his footprint is seen, like Ernst Haas and Saul Leiter, quite clearly in modern street photography today. An excellent and loving film has been made about Jay by one of his former assistants. a photographer called Stephen Wilkes. The film is called J Myself and can be streamed or bought on DVD. It's highly recommendable. Now, I've left a link to a film about that film, so it's a film about a film, on the show page today. Well, I've put the embedded film by Stephen on the show page today, so you can see that. I did say there's a fair few rabbit holes for you to follow on the show page today. Stephen Wilkes is a jack of all trades, says Lars. He handles most photographic genres, from commercial jobs for Pepsi to extensive editorial work. I came across TED Talk about his day and night photos after proper bandwidth was restored in Denmark land, and guess what? That film too will be on the show page. In the first minute of the film, sorry, breaking away again, Lars. In the first minute of the film, I have to say, and maybe Lars, you felt this way as well, I felt an intense pride that I make pictures, well, in my case, for fun and for a living. No spoilers, but the first minute of that film alone is worth watching, just for the sheer inspiration. Just go to the show page. From Wilkes, says Lars, I jumped to his counterpart in the advertising world, Arthur Mayerson. He's done many fantastic Coca-Cola commercials, but most of all, he is a master of colour photography, like Haas, his mentor, and shares the mantra of light, gesture and colour with his friend Jay Maisel. Thus, says Lars, the circle is complete and the blather ends. Is there time for a modest New Year's wish? Oh, after all that inspiration, how can I refuse? Go on, what is your wish? I would love, says Lars, to hear Tim Booth, Gregory Heisler, Jay Maisel, Stephen Wilkes and Arthur Mayerson, in no particular order, on the Photowalk in 2023. Blimey, you don't ask for much. I have to say, that letter took probably, well, when I compile the show, I look at the letters, I sometimes edit them slightly because I may need to shorten them just a tad. Not yours, obviously, Lars, I wouldn't dare. But yeah, and then I sort of compile them, I take them out with me and I read from them with my scratched notes as well. And your letter took probably, it was a couple of nights ago, probably 2, maybe even 3 hours to really get through, because of all the links and the photographers and the films. And I sort of, as I was going along, I said, I'll look at that later. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. But then I sort of binged it all in one. And I've come back since then as well, because there's bits I haven't seen. So thank you so much for that. What a great letter to start with for 2023, and for your troubles, although I don't suppose it was a trouble, for your inspiration. Let's use the inspiration word again. And the fact, by the way, that you have reminded me that having a camera with you can launch you into a creative, fulfilling world that you weren't quite expecting. I referenced Tim Booth making pictures of his grandmother's hands. For your inspiration and for that letter, and for all the names that you mentioned, I'm going to send you a famous, not so famous flask that will keep your drinks warm and hot in the few months of winter you have left in Denmark land, and keep them nice and cool and chilled in the sunnier ones to come. Right, some audio inspiration now, and it's going to come not from a name you mentioned, not least because I've not yet had a chance to interview them, but it's going to come from somebody I chatted with not so long ago, Alex Kilby, about his film A Photographic Eye, which is not his film, sorry, his YouTube channel, A Photographic Eye, which is incredible. And if you subscribe to one channel in this month alone, let that be Alex's, he made an extraordinary film about Ernst Haas, a film about seeing. It's a film called Cameras Serve No Purpose Unless You Learn to See. Long title, but worth it. Here are a few seconds from that movie that had me, well, practically whooping with "why didn't I think of that" moments.
Ernst Haas said that he wasn't interested in photographing new things, but more interested in how to see things in a new way. It's exciting to share photographers with you, because when we look at their images, when we see the way that they saw the world, then we can get an insight into how we can take the lessons that they had learned and put them into our own photographs. Ernst Haas was a master, an absolute master of the language of photography. He understood totally the vocabulary that he had at his disposal to create these images. We forget that these photographs were, to the photographer, photographs not of a period full of nostalgia, but a period that they were living in, a current world. So we kind of really need to take on board the first part of this language of communication within photography, is that once you get past that veneer of nostalgia, that you have to kind of remember that, you know, the photographer is taking photographs of everyday subjects, of everyday scenes, with a mantra that he doesn't want to photograph things in the same old fashion, but to see those things in a new way. As a photographer, I don't want you to sit there and go, oh, I haven't got any photograph, I need to go somewhere else to take pictures because there's nothing inspiring here. You can walk out your front door and be inspired by anything that's in front of you, so long as you start to see it in a new way. I get stupidly excited about going to Frankfurt, but why should I have to travel all the way to Germany to take photographs and be super inspired when I could actually just walk out my door and find awesome things in front of me if I just remember to take on board Ernst Haas's advice? See things new.
That's Alex Kilby. A few seconds turn into 120. I appreciate that. The full film of Alex's From a Photographic Eye, his channel, is on the show page. And as I say, make sure you subscribe. It's a brilliant channel full of fantastic ideas and advice. And well, Alex has 20 years photographic experience himself, so he's collected a fair bit of knowledge about making pictures, but also his knowledge about those who make the pictures is extraordinary, and he certainly makes films that I follow. Not only, just returning to Hegard the Dane for a moment, not only did he have a rabbit warren, or is it rabbit hole, or whatever the expression is, of photographers and films and ideas for the show page that would keep the fluffy wonderfuls of Watership Down busy for a month of Sundays. He actually sent some postscript ideas for the show as well, the PSs. If you haven't heard before the show, if you're new to these parts, well, welcome, number one. And at the end of the show, we have a play-out song, which is really just it's a musical interlude, a musical ending to the program. Something just to spend those last few moments of each week photographing together to. And before that, we have a postscript, a PS, a kind of almost final thought to the show. And today Lars suggested two, and one I'm going to share with you now because it really does complete the circle about Ernst Haas, and the other one I'm going to use at the end of today's show, a little injection of humour. But Ernst Haas said, we don't take pictures, we are taken by pictures. Never a truer word spoken, until the next truer word, of course. And the other postscript, as I say, at the end of the show is from Jay Maisel, and I'm saving that. When I was following all the links and the names that Lars served up, I did find another film about Jay Maisel, but not the photographic one. But I couldn't work out. It might be quite a melancholic story, but it's also quite amusing. And there's parts of it that aren't very politically correct, I have to say. And I watched it again and I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't share this, But I don't know. I keep coming back to it, and I want to share it, so I have on the show page. I haven't put it as a embedded film at the bottom of the page where I usually put the inspirational videos. I've put it as a link toward the top of the page, which you can follow to YouTube. But it's about another Jay Maisel who lives in New York, who had a comic store within a... I think he had trouble calling it a flea market, but within what would have traditionally been a flea market, a comic store that was being forced to close, and it's a film about the winds of change, and it's a film about because it's about comic books, it's about creativity, it's about, I suppose it's about the analog world in many respects. I thought you might enjoy it. It's quite a long movie. I think it was an hour in all. I skipped a few bits, but I've subsequently come back and watched a few more. But I'll put that, it's a bit left field, I do appreciate. I suppose in some respects, on the new Extra Mile show, that will be what I would call a off the beaten track feature, which is one of the new features to come on that show. But anyway, the link is on the show page, for better or for worse. Right, the first part of my conversation with street photographer Ruben Radding in a moment. First up, a message from Elliot Thomas, who is doing what I've heard a fair few photographers, I say fair few, that's not very scientific, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe, who I know of, who are doing a kind of a New Year detoxing from social overload last year. Hi Neil, says Elliot, I'm currently taking a break from socials. So I'm no longer visiting the Facebook page or posting on Instagram. I feel I need to get back to the drawing board and hone my skills in photography without all the background noise. But I thought I'd mention one of the things I got for Christmas this year. It's and this is apposite because we're about to talk about street photography. It's a street photography challenge by David Gibson in the form of cards. Loads of different ideas and challenges on them. Let me quote. The Street Photography Challenge is a boxed set of 50 cards, each giving a simple idea for snapping great images every day. Snapping? Did we just use the word snapping? Flip each card over for an example image and turn to the enclosed booklet when you need more detail. Grab your camera or your phone, pull a card and get out there. My plan for the new year, says Elliot, is to look through my archives and print more of my images, as I'm limited on time to go out and shoot, but this is a great way to keep the fire alive. Cheers and Happy New Year to you from Elliot Thomas. And that is a fine way to introduce my guest today as we walk along here. I must make some more pictures. That's one thing I will do more this year, because sometimes I know I come back and I think, not made many. I've been out on a photo walk, but I've not made many pictures. I'll do that while you listen to Ruben. Now, Peter Foote will enjoy this one particularly, I think, since you wrote in to remind me of Ruben's work. He's a street photographer, is Ruben, based out of Brooklyn. And, rather than me give an elongated introduction here, I did a pretty good job of it within the world's longest first interview question. So this is part one of my conversation with Ruben Radding. Ruben, one of the last guests of 22 for me was a street photographer based in the UK, Neil Jorgensen, and I was very much taken by his endearing influence, being not one of the photographic greats per se, but a poet called Philip Larkin, whose vision of life through his prose is much like that of a street photographer's fascination with life. So it seems fitting to be speaking to my first guest of 23, who is, and I quote, guided by the scent of great human character and fragility, poetic physical gestures of emotion or energy, explosions of life force, and human interactions which imply uncertain stories when stopped in time. There's a lot more, Ruben, isn't there, to seeing on the street than simply getting lucky, it would seem, with the odd moment or three, isn't there?
Yeah, well, I mean, luck certainly plays a role. We're in a total collaboration with the life around us, and we depend on that life to bring the material to our wherever we are. But no, I think there's a lot more to it than luck. Otherwise, I would probably have a hard time continuing for this many years.
But it is a collaborative. I'm pleased you said collaboration. It's a dance almost with those that you spend time with on the street.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the longer I do this, the more I feel like I sort of surrender myself into this larger organism of the city or of life.
Yeah.
And some of that's the people, some of it's objects, it's many things, but all of it's in a constant state of change and of movement. And it seems to have its own life and rhythm that is independent of me, and I just try to submit myself to it and become a part of it. And that's when actually the work is the most satisfying. It really has little to do with whether I'm getting what I think are good pictures. When I reach that state of feeling like I'm just in what some people call a groove, or a state of sort of very easily and naturally moving through this organism, then I feel really connected.
It's often said that we invest a whole load of us in the picture as well. And going back to that wonderful piece in your introduction on your website, do you feel a sense of fragility too when you're out there making your pictures?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's a misconception on a lot of people's part when they look at street photography. They imagine that the photographer is this person who's very much on the outside of everything looking in, this sort of voyeuristic concept. And I don't feel that way very much. A lot of, even when I'm being stealthy about my activity, I feel like I'm a part of everything that's going on. And that sense of connectedness used to be very hard for me to come by. I would walk the streets and feel very apart from things. And there's something about the act of photographing, or the practice of photographing, that keeps me feeling much more connected.
How has that connection changed through the years as you've matured in your craft?
I think it just becomes more of a solace. At first it's something you would sort of will myself to do, or do in reaction to things. Like before I was a photographer, when my first wife and I would have a fight, I would walk out and just start walking, and I'd go on these really long walks and just observe everything going on around me. And eventually I would feel better. And then later, when I started photographing, I found that was exactly the same thing I was drawn to do, was just go on these long walks. Some street photographers like to hang on certain corners, or just stay in certain zones, like a square. I found that my inclination was always to just keep walking. And in that walking, a lot of loss of self can happen. The sort of, when I would have the fight with my first wife and go walking, I would be thinking mostly about myself. And then once I started doing those walks with a camera, I started thinking less and less about myself. But inevitably, because I'm a human being with an ego, a lot of my interior life when I'm out shooting ends up revolving around self-centered fear or desires and so on. A lot of, concern over whether what I'm doing is the right thing to do, or whether it's even worth doing at all. Or whether I'm doing it better than I used to, or better than someone else. Or whether it's ever going to matter. And then inevitably, I think a lot about mortality. Now that I'm in my mid-50s, I think about it all the time.
Does that make a difference? I saw a film we'll talk a lot about. There's questions that come from the film that I watched. But you did mention this fascination with your own mortality now. Is that making a difference to the way you photograph?
I think so. It certainly helps with those times where I might be tempted to worry about whether what I'm doing is important, or whether it matters, or, anything like that, because I think, well, for all I know, this could be the last day I get to do it. Yeah. I think, if anything, what it does is the thought of mortality encourages me to let go of any sort of sense of story or narrative that I think I'm living in, because my mind makes up all these narratives about the moment, that I'm at a particular point in my trajectory, a particular point in my lifespan, a particular relationship to the medium, to the city, to, a life's work. Any of these sort of things, they're all imagination, that none of this is necessarily real. It's all can be changed in a single moment. I think what the thought of mortality does for me is it actually challenges me to let go a great deal. Instead of feeling like I have to control more things, I feel like I can let go more.
It's interesting, isn't it, that as photographers, we have, my wife says this, she says, you have far too much time to think sometimes. And I sense that's what you're doing on the street. We do have an extraordinary amount of time to think, don't we?
Yeah, well, especially working alone.
Yeah.
My previous creative life before I discovered photography was in music.
Yeah.
And music is most often a really collaborative art. There were really great things about that for me from a community standpoint, and collaboration often brings out really exciting things you would never think of on your own. But I really love the solitude of working as a photographer and not being dependent on collaborators, despite what I said about being in collaboration with life. So, yeah, that leaves a lot of time and space for your mind to be very active.
Yeah.
And like I was saying before, what I really love is when I get into a real rhythm with the work and sort of leave my ego behind, I feel really transformed. And that's when that feeling of connection to everything happens. It's very, very similar to what people say they get out of something like Zen meditation or even some forms of physical exercise. Even people I know who are runners can describe having very similar kind of experience.
It's interesting you say the Zen experience. I feel that with my social photography work, that I'm with 100 people, but I'm not really with 100 people. I'm with myself.
Yeah, I find that my entire mental activity changes. When I first walk out the door, and it's not necessarily for the purpose of photographing, but anytime I walk out my door, I find that my mind, if I observe it, is in a constant state of judgment. I'm making all these snap judgments based on purely just appearances and how I observe people behave. And when I really am in the groove of photographing, I might have all the same opinions, but I don't have the feelings, and I don't feel judgmental. Well, things that I would normally be very judgmental of, I simply find entertaining and amazing. Somebody being really aggressive with someone else, and of course it's wrong, and I don't think it should happen, but I'll observe it and just be just so in awe of the circus of life. The epiphany came really for me about 6 years ago, when I realized that ever since I was a kid, I had this idea in my head that an artist's life was 24/7, that there wasn't normal time and creative time. And no one told me that. This wasn't something that, I was led to believe by some faulty source, but it did turn out to be kind of a misnomer as I started my life as a musician and found that I was constantly having to waiting to get the right people together, getting the right equipment together, having a space to do things in, or to get a gig, and then to get to the gig. There was always something to wait for. And then there was this hour and a half a day where you got to be alive. And I also really hated responsibility, and I hated things that were just work for work's sake or busyness. I wanted to do the fun stuff. And so as I got older and more dissatisfied as a musician, I wish I had understood a little bit better of what it was that I was so frustrated with. Because when I started photographing, it all started to get better. And then when I had this epiphany 6 years ago and realized that photography was solving a problem for me I'd never really been fully clear about having, I realized, it's not that I have to photograph 24 hours a day. It just means that it's so freeing to me that I could, that at any given hour of any given day, I could take a picture. There's nothing in my way.
I want to rewind the clock a lot more into the late 80s. Is when you moved to Brooklyn. It's a place that's synonymous with great works of street storytelling. Had you not made that move, with the path, I know that there's a crossover of music and photography as well, and we're talking about quite a wide time span. But had you not made that move, do you think the path, the photographic one at least, would have been very different for you?
I mean, I think my entire life would have been different. if I hadn't moved to New York City. I mean, I moved here when I was only 21 years old. And at the time, I thought I was a real salty veteran of life. And, the truth is I was a child.
Yeah.
And, I look at a 21-year-old now and I just can't imagine how I even survived. But I think my appetite for experience and a greater world than I was finding in the DC suburbs would have led me somewhere far more active and varied than Washington, D.C., where I grew up. But how it would have affected my photography, I mean, it's so hard to imagine an objective answer to that. I didn't start photographing seriously until I was almost 40 years old.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of your more recent projects then. You made several COVID diary photo projects, and as much, Ruben, as I'm trying to expel the C word from being used within this show, it's an important part of what you've seen over the last couple of years. What were your own personal feelings as you took to the street when that was the one place that many were simply trying to avoid? Certainly in this country. I don't know quite what it was like in New York.
Oh, the streets were absolutely empty, and a lot of people who had the means left the city entirely. I had the opposite reaction. I found the idea of leaving the city, even for a minute, inconceivable. It really taught me how umbilically connected I am to this city at this point. I felt when the shutdown happened that I couldn't bear the idea of not witnessing my city going through whatever it was about to go through. Because, in the beginning, we had no idea how long shutdown would last. We had no idea how long the pandemic would last.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I remember speculations of a couple of weeks, and then that became, well, certainly into next month. And then it became, well, this is going to go on for a while.
Yeah.
And, I would start off each day reading news and social media online, and my anxiety level would just go through the roof. And then I would go outside with my camera, and within about an hour, I would start to feel completely normal and okay. I mean, there might be things that I'd see that were scary, or things I would see that would make me worry about the future or whatever, but all of it was real, and the stuff online was just all this blah, blah, blah. And so there was something about going out into the world and experiencing whatever the hell it really was that I found really grounding and comforting. And for me, just necessary. Yeah. Like, I just couldn't bear to wonder what was going on out there, because I just spent the last however many years being out almost every day and being out in it. It just was inconceivable to me, the idea of staying home. It kind of saved my life. I think I would have gone insane staying home.
There were many historical changes during that period too, and we spoke to photographers at the time who'd said that the attitude towards photography had changed. And whilst I know that you're not necessarily involved in news editorial, I wonder whether you've seen those changes through your lens.
Well, I mean, that's been going on a long time. I think if anyone has observed specific changes that relate to 2020, there were some arguments that were already being made that were negative about photography or photographers that I was already hearing for years, that during 2020 just seemed to become a much louder argument, particularly on the part of more left-wing activists, or people who are a little more reactionary. But no, I mean, it's also silly because I see people being very hypocritical. There were activists who I would see at certain protests who were very confrontational with photographers and ordering us to, not record people's faces or so on. But then these same people would be live streaming from their phone to social media, So it was, there seemed to be a lot of hypocrisy in a lot of those arguments. There was also arguments that I'd been hearing for years already about what kind of person has the right to photograph what kind of person, which I think is silly. And, it's very amusing to see the way that that's changed over the years. When I first got into photography, I, was a big student of so-called documentary photography. And the arguments were sort of the opposite. It was like, all about people of privilege, being encouraged to go and tell the stories of people who had less ability to be heard, and give voice to the voiceless, is the cliche, And now I see a lot of criticism of that. People feeling like the only people who are qualified to tell the story of the voiceless are other members of the voiceless community. Yeah. And I just think all of it should be valued. I think there's as much value to an outsider coming into some situation as there is of the insiders themselves. Because if the concern is about objective truth, which by the way is not my topic, objective truth is just as often obscured by people directly involved with events as with outsiders. We idealize ourselves, and I feel it when someone talks to me or photographs me. I want to show my best side. I want to portray myself in a certain light. And is that truthful? Is that objectively more right? I think that's a real open question, and I'm just really glad that it's not a question that I have anything to do with, because I'm not really concerned with portraying anybody's objective truth.
Let's talk about the way you work. I was reintroduced to your work by a photographer called Peter Foote, who'd seen a film, which I've mentioned, and I've devoured several times now. And right near the front, there was an interesting anecdote where you suggest you have a sense of turmoil if you're given too much choice when it comes to kit. I.e., if Ruben Radding carries 2 lenses, it's too many in both senses of the spelling.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And even just recently tried going out with 2 cameras, and even with the 2 of them being at the same focal length, I still found myself overwhelmed by the tyranny of options. I need to keep things very simple. And, one of the great benefits of that is that I feel like I can operate very intuitively with my camera, that I never have to think that much about, are my settings right? There's only a couple of settings I'm going to be using. I hardly even have to look at it. That's just very comforting for someone like me, who's naturally obsessive and, always thinks there might have been a better way to do it. I found that when I used to work with a single lens reflex, for instance, because of the way the focusing mechanism works, when you're looking through the lens and focusing, you're usually looking at, maybe it's not true with these mirrorless cameras now, but with old single lens reflexes, you're looking through what's essentially the, widest aperture your lens can go to, right? So you're seeing the shallowest depth of field imaginable and focusing that way. And I found that working that way made me very, very obsessive about sharpness. Right. If I wasn't really nailing focus, I could really make myself crazy. And when I changed to rangefinders, looking through a completely clear piece of glass, that all changed. I found it much easier to be loose, much easier to forgive a little bit of blown focus, focus a little back or a little ahead of where I wanted to be. That was permissible there. So there's something about choosing that machine that helped me let go of another part of my obsessiveness, and limiting myself to one lens does that. That's just how I need it to be.
And actually, watching you work in that film was fascinating, because if there's an alchemy left in photography that people love to learn, it's how those that they follow achieve their work. And I was fascinated to see that you hardly look through that viewfinder, cut glass or other. What does this method bring to your work?
Well, a lot of different things. I think what makes me the most committed to working that way, other than just the helpful aspect of people not necessarily realizing that I'm taking a picture, which helps me to not interrupt the activity that I'm observing, is that I believe very much in something that Gary Winogrand said about us. He said, we know too much about pictures and what makes pictures look like they do. And so how do you keep from making the same pictures over and over? And I take that very seriously, because when I was first learning how to do this, I feel like the types of pictures I was trying to take were very much like things I'd seen before. the things that really excited me in the long term as years went on, the pictures I'd taken that really, for me, stood the test of time were ones that didn't look like the kinds of pictures I'd seen before. They were different and therefore more memorable. And to me, I think about pictures the same way I think about a song or a symphony or a poem. I want to make something that's memorable, that's worthy of being memorable, even. And so I feel like everything that we see as an established sort of piece of canon, a kind of picture that's imitatable because we understand what makes it special, it came from somewhere. There was a time when that kind of picture didn't exist, and then it did. So, whether that's a sort of classic piece of war photography or a certain kind of approach to landscapes that people have repeated many times, these things become very familiar and therefore less memorable. So the search for new kinds of forms for me is a really important part of that. And, I'm not going to credit myself with having found anything previously unseen or anything, but that's where I find the most fruit of my labor when it comes to looking for fresher frames, fresher forms, proximities and angles that I wouldn't do if I was holding the camera to my eye.
Does that mean you try not to look too much? We're absolutely treated to a plethora of amazing photography online, and in particular street. Do you try and stay away from looking at too much because that can constrain you somewhat as a photographer, being led by the work you read instead of the landscape you see?
No, I don't have to really make much effort to avoid it. I certainly see a lot, and I have a lot of books, and, I look at photography all the time. I spend a lot of time looking at my students' work. There's a great deal of it that becomes just sort of a kind of background noise, repetitious, tropes and familiar sort of forms. And I find that as time goes on, I make less and less effort at avoiding or seeking anything in that way. Like, one thing that I feel pretty bad about sometimes is considering how many photo books I buy, I spend relatively small amounts of time sitting and looking at them. And I think about that a lot when I'm considering buying another book. I think, oh my gosh, is this going to be another one that I, look at for 20 minutes and then put on the shelf and don't return to for years at a time, But, really what I'm much more interested in doing is spending time with my own work and really just trying to understand where I'm headed. I think what's changed for me when I was younger, and I think about this as far as how I was in my music life as well as in photography, is I think I absorbed a lot of other people's work, searching for models, searching for examples and potential pathways, or, to try and understand other people's solutions with the idea that they might be clues to my solutions. And what I discovered in my ingestion of all of that, and also of all the biographies of other artists that I would read, is that nobody's story was the same, and that everybody's solutions were personal. And so the more you're looking to other people's solutions for clues, you're kind of off the mark, because your solutions are going to be something else. We all are facing different problems inside ourselves, even if we think we're facing the same problems in the visual world. So, when I was younger and I would obsessively read biographies of anyone from, say, Orson Welles to, John Lennon, I was finding these completely different trajectories and completely different concerns. And, it didn't occur to me until decades later that mine were going to be completely different, and learning about these other people's paths didn't really affect mine.
And Ruben Radding returns for part 2 of our conversation shortly. There's loads of sticks. I've not got Sir Barkalot with me. Look, he'd have loved this one. Fetch! Shall I run after it myself? We bought him for Christmas one of those ball throwers. You can sort of scoop it up. I watch people use them on the beach. They effortlessly scoop up the ball and then ping. It pings about, 30, 40 meters, And the dog rushes after it, bang, 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 brings it back, looks absolutely worn out, asks you to do it again, ping, do it a second time. After a half-hour walk, they're shattered, and they're loving it. Our Barnes, our Subarcolot, has just not got the idea of fetch at all. I'm beginning to think of myself worse as a dog parent here. I don't think we taught him correctly. I don't know what happens. Do they automatically pick up this idea of fetch, or do you have to train it into them? Because so far I ping the ball, ping. He looks at it, runs after it, picks it up, throws it back out, and runs back to me again. I'm thinking, no, that's not the point. You're supposed to bring it back to me. So no Subarcolot this week. I may well have him for the first of the extra miles. I don't know. Meanwhile, send in your pictures and your stories this year in 2023. It's wonderful to hear from you. I love to see where you are in the world. It's the geography sometimes of the pictures. Well, no, often, always of the pictures that enthralls me. It's fantastic to see where you are. See, your normal is my extraordinary, because what you see every single day, and this comes up really in our conversation. Does it come up in our conversation today? I don't know. I've been editing a few things over the last few days, but it's something that comes up, isn't it? You know, quite often is that we don't necessarily appreciate what's on our doorstep. We think, oh, I've got to go somewhere really fancy to make pictures, when what's on our doorstep is somebody else's fantastic. So yeah, send them in, please. Send your stories. They don't have to have pictures. If you've got pictures, please, I love to see where you're walking. Send them to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you can make them 2,000 pixels wide, please. Fantastic. I think we're going to change some of the dimensions of the website this year, so 2,500 pixels may be better, but makes no odds. 2,000 for the moment is absolutely fine. If you're sending in just some lines, some thoughts, then you might want to visit the lines. Oh, that sounded a bit schoolish, didn't it? Lines, boy, can you do lines? Oh yes, sir. All right. What do you want me to say? If you're sending in some thoughts, then just go to the contact page, and there's a place you can send from within there. And also on the Facebook page, I will be making more of Facebook this year. A wonderful Facebook group, not the page. We have a page, but the group. The group that you can join, then I'll be making more of that, because there's some fantastic stories that appear in there. So Facebook, or you can send through email or via the website. Thank you. Is this a big tractor coming towards me? There's me thinking I had a nice quiet place to walk. Thank you to our extra milers, our patrons who walk and go the extra Photo Walk mile to support this show with a modest monthly or annual donation. Your generosity goes toward the costs of producing this weekly programme, and it keeps it here in the podcast sphere. For you, every week there is another show. It's a new show this year. I walk an extra mile for you, and I get a mite more personal with my diary and sharing my inspirations. Plus you get to hear additional parts of conversations with guests, and once a month we meet online, of course, in our Zoom meetup, and I get very excited about you showing your pictures and us talking about them and talking about photography in general as well. And we start up the shiny new Extra Mile for 23 next Wednesday, the Wednesday to come. If you're listening to this in a couple of weeks' time, that won't make any sense at all. But if you're listening to it on the day intended, it's the coming Wednesday. And, would you like to know what's on it? I start the year with something very different indeed. It's a conversation with a podcasting friend. A podcaster who has spoken to a great many well-known, famous photographers. Not only that, he partnered with Sean Tucker for a show called Deep Natter. And in many ways, it's a personal conversation about all manner of stuff, not all of it photographic. We chatted for well over an hour, and I'm still going through the edit at the moment, but I'm not sure I want to take much out, really. It's a conversation with Jeffrey Sedaris.
On next week's Extra Mile.
There are maybe 1,000 wet plate photographers in the business right now, maybe less. So the odds of getting work seen and being recognized or being unique, if I can get a handle on this and do it well, of course, if I can produce at the level that deserves to be, looked at, the odds of getting work seen feel like they might be greater than another method of shooting.
Also, we'll go off the beaten track both musically and personally, and there's a little more from Ruben Radding. We talk about aboutness. About whatness, Neil? Aboutness, yes. Intrigued?
Cartier-Bresson's photo of the man jumping the puddle behind the train station.
Yeah.
What's that about? If anything, it's about photography.
More from Ruben Radding next Wednesday on the Extra Mile Show. You can become an Extra Miler by clicking on the Support the Show icon on the front of the website, photowalk.show, and the new Extra Mile Show, plus actually hundreds of other shows that are already there, by the way, including the replay shows and the original More Show. There were 100 episodes of that alone. They're all there, waiting for your ears. So they are. So the first of our new assignments are coming soon. You have a month now to complete the assignment. We'll come to the first in a moment's time. Right, here's a letter from Matisse Vescher. We're back in Germany land for this one. Germany, by the way, on the map of where the show is listened to, is positively glowing. Brighter than ever. I think you are this month. I think this month, or last month anyway, you were you were in the top 4 as number 4. It goes sort of UK and America land, sort of exchanging places, and then Canada land, and then Germany land. I think this feels very much like we should do a retreat in some of the amazing Bavarian forests. And I choose those because my uncle lives there with my auntie and my cousins. So two birds, one stone, two stones, one bird, two... anyway, you know the expression. Here's one from Matisse then. Hello, Neil. It's me again, your other listener. I'm sure there's at least 3 or 4 of us. I wouldn't be much surprised if there were perhaps more. What do you mean? There's a whole clan of other listeners, like a subculture. Anyway, says Matisse, over Christmas, coming from a big family with members scattered all over Germany land, I didn't get much time practicing my favourite style of photography, which is landscape, because my wife and I spent time on the road visiting parents and siblings and nieces and nephews. So instead of landscapes, I'm currently photographing humans. An unusual genre for me, for sure. A while back, I figured that we do have lots of snapshots from family gatherings, but barely any proper candid photographs. So I started bringing my camera as often as I can to capture as many happy moments as I can. And I've sent 2 of my favourites from the recent Christmas meetups. And the other 2 are from a recent outing to a place I've been trying to photograph for months now. It's that one where I mentioned you in my Insta story a week or 2 ago, applying for a flask. Oops, we didn't send one this time yet. Here's a whole year to come, Matisse. The location offers a view over the small village of Wittenberg and with its abbey, and the castle Marienburg near Nordstemmen in the background. Way too small to notice with the focal lengths I use, but in the right conditions, a great spot. I assume a colourful sunrise would work. We're facing east in these shots, and the sun rises to the right of the abbey and castle, so it should cover those buildings in beautiful golden light, in theory at least. And fog in the valley, that might help as well. Fog machines, Matisse, that's what you need. Great big fog machines, Hollywood-style fog machines. Or just a lot of those misters that all the YouTubers talk about. I've been here 3 times, says Matisse, over the course of maybe 7 or 8 months now, and while I've never brought home a keeper, I've enjoyed every trip. After all, it's really just about being out with your camera. The images are a welcome excuse. Thank you for a continuously great podcast. You're very welcome. and very flattering. Thank you. I'll pop your pictures on the show page. I'm going to put them up as a montage. The show page is busy today. Not lots and lots of photographs, actually, but just lots to do and follow and watch. And Matisse's pictures. And I'll have maybe, I don't know, one or two. I'm not photographing a lot today. Note to self. Another 3 words. Make more pictures. Yep. But yes, Matisse, thank you. And at some stage this year, I'm absolutely sure a famous, not so famous flask will be heading out your way.
For quality used and inspected photo and video kit with a 6-month guarantee upon what you buy, visit mpb.com.
Can you hear that in the background? I don't know what that is. Somebody's decided to come along and ruin our lovely, peaceful walk that we were having. They're chopping something down, I think, by the looks of it. All right, let me make another picture. Look up was advice that the late, great Steve said to us, wasn't it? Look up, he said. Isn't that what Steve Shipman said? It was. So I'm going to look up. Ooh, gone all dizzy. Hold on. Put letters down there. When you look up, try not to spiral at the same time, Neil. What can we get? Let's look up. Look through these trees. I quite like because you can make a nice they're kind of like, I don't know, like hands in themselves, really. These ones are anyway. They're sort of, there's 2 trees reaching across each other, 2 canopies reaching across. What have we got here? F8 250th. Let's get this. There we go. Another one for the, my sketchbook images today, some of which may well be on the show page. Excited to receive yours. As I said before, if you'd like to send them in, please do. The email address is stories@photowalk.show, and I've been waiting for your story and your pictures, for a long time now. All right, Neil, I'm on it. Give us a break. We've only just started the year. Right, monthly assignments. Now, we had the Monday assignment show. It ran for many, many months, and it was, actually, as a show that was listened to, it had good figures. As a show where you joined in with assignments and sent them into the show page, it sort of wavered from week to week, really. But that wasn't always what the point was, of course, because the idea was you didn't have to send pictures in. It was a kind of, a rolling inspiration of episodes for you, and with ideas of places you could go shoot and things to do. But I think one of the biggest messages to come out of the poll that we did, the survey that we did prior to Christmas this year, was that you'd like to join in with more, and probably a once a month thing would be better. So, your wish is my command, and we have the assignment now will be set on the first Friday photo walk of the month. So this being the first Friday in January, the first Friday episode, then that's where we're going to set the assignment. So you have a month to join in with this. Send your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. I'm now new for 23. I'm going to choose one that has particularly spoken to me, and I'm going to be sending a famous, not so famous flask. So there we go. Some bribery at the same time. Not that you need it, obviously. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you have this year, and I think by giving you some more weeks to, and you'll need it with this first one, some more weeks to plan and go out and shoot, then we should see some fantastic collections of pictures. I'm going to make its own bespoke page, and I will start doing that as they roll in this month. So, shall we go for our first? Alex Ward was my last guest of 22. He's our first assignment guest of 23. There's poetry in that, isn't there? He is setting January's assignment.
The Photo Walk assignment.
Alex, you're the first of the brand new assignment series. First of all, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Big plans for this year ahead?
Yes, I'm not sure what they are yet. I'm going to use January to figure that out. But yes, as always push myself.
At the start of the year, I have and I know you will because I think we talked about this last time, but I have a spring clean, very early, obviously, spring clean of everything in the studio. I throw out old kit, sell old kit, move stuff, paint stuff, hide stuff. Well, and I think you're going to be doing the same because you've moved your studio into the garage, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yeah, so I've come from like an outbuilding into, we've just moved house, so I've now got into a garage, which is great, but has all the issues that you'd expect from moving into a garage fresh. So I've got a lot of work to do.
Painting, drywalling, and so on and so forth. Well, that's a project in itself, and it's a project that we're going to start with for the assignment this year, isn't it? We closed at the tail end of 22 with you, and we were talking projects, and essentially you're setting a project as the first assignment. So what do we have, and what are you setting?
Well, I think it's really important that as photographers, we have projects, and they could be something that lasts a few days or something that lasts, years. But I think it's important, and I think it's important we put part of ourselves into those projects as well. So what I'd really like is to set an assignment that asks everyone listening to create a mini project. So shoot afresh, so this is not an archival project, and then to curate a series of 5 images. Generally, that's the hardest part, I think, as photographers and anyone I work with, getting images down and going through the culling process to get that number down. So we'd like to end up with a series of 5 images that are sequenced. I'd like to see an opening shot or an establishing shot in there and a closing shot, which typically are wide shots. And then somewhere within that sequence, a detail shot as well. The idea here is to have some narrative for a reader to have a look at these 5 images in sequence and understand a story there. So that's really the focus of this. So the flow and the sequencing is really important.
Should the narrative have text, or are you asking folk to tell a story sans text and to sell us and tell us by picture only?
Yes, I think let's do it without text. I think it makes it more challenging.
Yeah.
And even I would go a step further and say, when you're presenting the work, not to give it a title, to just call it untitled. So to not lead the reader at all, to give no context, and to just have people look at the images.
That makes it even more fascinating, isn't it? Untitled. Your features and your projects are around people, essentially. Does this need to be?
No, definitely not. It can be around any subject. My advice would be to create something that has a part of you in it. I think we create our best work when we give up part of ourselves and we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in some kind of way. So I think something that you're connected to in some way or other, I think is very important.
Have you ever told a story completely minus the text?
I think I have in probably group situations or coaching situations, but generally when I present a project, I tend to present bigger projects, rather kind of small series. But I think this is what as artists we should be fighting towards, really. I think what we should be going towards.
And the number 5, is that an arbitrary number or?
The sweet spot has always been between 3 and 5 images for a short series, and that always kind of feels quite right. I think to have a defined number on it is quite important in this task, because it means people that have 4 images will be encouraged to shoot more, or to use something that they've taken in a different way, and people that have taken 1,000 images can work really hard to get down to that 5. So I think it's important to have.
I remember, I think it might have been Tom Stoddart who was talking about telling stories in Africa, and I'm going to have to paraphrase now because it was a conversation from an interview where he discussed this idea of showing a story in 5 or 6 images, I think he said, actually, which is why I was drawn to your number 5. If you can tell a story in a newspaper across 2 double-page spreads and 5 pictures, then you've told the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, in this instance, I think it's good to have a firm number. It might be that, when you're doing commissions and editorials, things like that, you go for different parameters, but I feel like 5 is a good place.
Colour, black and white?
Doesn't matter.
And in terms of putting together a project, if you're thinking, well, how would I display this? Would you go all landscape or square or portrait orientated? Or again, does that not matter?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm certainly a photographer who steps away from the technical and tries to focus on the feeling and the narrative of images. So I think things like that shouldn't really matter. It could be a series of five images with completely different aspect ratios. I'd probably expect to see them all colour or all black and white. But again, your individual style might be that you really mix that up, and that is part of the story.
Well, I love the idea of Untitled as the start of this for 2023. Untitled, 5 images telling a story. Very important that you have an opening, probably wide, you said, opening and closing image to establish an establisher, and what would you call it? A closer?
A closing shot.
A closing shot. And then in between, well, we'll see where you take us with your stories.
Very excited to see this.
The Photowalk assignment.
And I'm excited to see what you come up with as well. There'll be, as I said, a dedicated page for each assignment, which we will fire up as the entries come in. Right, talking of fire, some quick fire letters before I play you part 2 of today's conversation with street photographer Ruben Radding. Lisa Yedding, first of all. Hello, Neil. A quick note to say Happy New Year. Not sure if you're doing resolutions. Well, we kind of are, as mentioned per the start of the show. But I've set some photographic ones. The main one is to take more pictures of my family, which I suppose, well, no, not I suppose, it is in every way like the note from Matisse just a moment ago. Last year, personal loss, says Lisa, taught me to think very differently about the something and nothing pictures that you sometimes mention. The somethings and nothings actually are the somethings and everythings, says Lisa. So that's my resolution, to make everythings from the nothings. I like that. I really do. Can I pinch that one? I think that's very nice. I'm sorry to hear about your loss over the year last year, but if the lesson that comes from it, if what comes from it is the good of making more pictures of your family, then well, that's a sterling resolution to have. And then one from Stan Crook. Hi Neil, thought I'd take the time to introduce myself as your other new listener. There's lots of other listener mentions this week. I think I certainly captured your imagination at the end of last year with that. I read and listened with interest to the Extra Mile episode, Can We Get Personal? To which parts of it I can relate. Yes, that was an episode. It was the last few weeks of 22, wasn't it? Can We Get Personal? You see, I too contributed to the Christmas spending spree, albeit unwillingly. Firstly, you remember, just to give this some context, all the machinery and stuff that's just been breaking around me over the last month. Firstly, our dishwasher withdrew its services, resulting in Argos being the first beneficiary, followed very quickly with the boiler coming out in sympathy with your one. Oh, no, surely not. As I entered the shower, the only way to describe the feeling without expletives was it was a tad chilly. The local plumber being the beneficiary. Fortunately, he's a family friend, so we purchased the boiler at cost price. Phew, says Stan. Stan, come on, man. I could have done with your family member popping around. I think we're going to be paying ours off at £1 a week for the rest of our lives. Anyway, to introductions, I've included a photograph, reduced pixels, he says, of our famous dog, Sandy, a.k.a. Fearless. Famous in our village because people asked to have their photo taken with her. Yeah, thank you for the photograph. And you are right about the reduced pixels. They were so reduced I can't actually use it on the show page. I can't show Fearless. But I did show Fearless to Sabark a lot, who sort of feigned interest, as he does. But I'm sure he was. And after listening to the wild water swimming episode, says Stan, I may have some, in our neck of the woods. There's a group called the Flashers. Not for the reason you may be thinking, but they swim in the local flash. And I've seen them swimming while I've been out with Fearless. Flash is a Cheshire term for a lake formed via subsidence. Or is it subsidence? In some pronunciations, in some places. Anyway, see, you learn something every single photo walk. Thank you, Stan. Thank you for being part of the Extra Mile too. I really appreciate your support. Right, From one kind of walking to another, walking the streets of New York City with my guest. This is the second part, my concluding part, my conversation with Ruben Radding. It was relieving, Ruben, to hear you say that you can spend a lot of the day walking without taking one single picture at all, even in New York. Can you go a day without making a picture that will somehow be a keeper, though? Or knowing now that you're quite hard on yourself, I wonder if you're frustrated when you do return home, or if you do return home without the picture.
Yeah, for sure. Not if it's one day, That's a pretty familiar feeling. Of course, I'd be happier if I came home feeling like I had a really, immortal picture. But there have also been times I came home feeling like that, and then later looked at the picture and thought, well, it's not actually that good. So, all of those feelings are fleeting, and they all will change. Yeah. I will say, though, that if more than 2 or 3 days goes by where I don't feel like I've added to the little list of things I like, I will get pretty dark and sometimes not even realize why. So yeah, I that helps keep me working.
I've left it a while to ask, but I am intrigued why just black and white when I see so much street work these days where color plays a pivotal role in the narration of the story.
Why I gravitate to it in the first place is sort of its own answer, and then why I've committed to it is sort of its own answer. Okay. Looking at the roots of it, I think a lot of it is about my childhood, growing up when I did at the end of the 60s. And, for the first however many years of my young life, we only had a black and white television set in my home, and all of the books with pictures in them that I was excited about as a kid were black and white pictures. And there was something about the black and white world that I found not only extremely evocative and felt very transported by, there was something I kind of identified with in there. And I don't really understand that, but it's real. And I feel like it's the same way that I felt when I heard rock and roll music for the first time, or, anything else that I really relate to. There was this sort of shock of recognition or feeling of identification. But then when I started photographing, even though I really liked black and white, and it was my first inclination, I felt like there was all this subject matter that had to be seen in color for you to do justice to it. And so it was very helpful when some teachers of mine suggested that maybe I didn't need to shoot color anymore.
They let you off the hook.
Yeah, absolutely. They gave me the permission that I needed to put it down. Yeah. And there was a sort of epiphany that came with that, which they didn't talk about, but I felt immediately, which was, if that was the case, if it was okay for me to just be a black and white photographer, that meant there were going to be all these pieces of subject matter that weren't going to be useful to me. And, much like with carrying only one lens, that turned out to be very freeing rather than a problem, So if I saw a particular mural on the street, or a situation where two things were red that felt really interesting, I'd just recognize that wasn't subject matter for my kind of picture.
But it is a magical medium, isn't it? And it's something that is endearing and you take with you. And it sounds like you will take it with you for your entire career to come.
Well, I think so. I mean, every time I've ever said that, I'll do something forever or never change, that, I'm unfortunately proven wrong some years later. But that being said, I do feel really committed to black and white. And the more that time goes on and the more I get asked about it in interviews and so on, the more I understand what it is for me. And part of it to me is that I feel like it's really in harmony with the nature of the medium, because photography is all about reduction. We have this 360-degree world with, things that appeal to 5 senses and, 3D and all that. And we flatten it into 2 dimensions, make a rectangle out of it, stop time. And that reduction already is really significant. And black and white is just one more level of reduction, taking the color away. So in a sense, I feel like my love of black and white is a further love of the medium itself. And then from a practical standpoint, it solves a lot of problems because, you know, if I were the kind of photographer who's working in a studio, who has control over, you know, almost every aspect of what's in front of the camera as well as what I'm doing with it, I can solve a lot of color problems that come up easily. But because I'm working extemporaneously all the time, you know, on the street or in bars or wherever I am, there are all kinds of pictures that would be really great, except that there's some sort of clash of color or color that sticks out and distracts from what you want the eye to see. And so black and white just immediately solves a lot of potential problems.
You mentioned the word timing. I did want to talk about timing. It's about timing, but equally I wonder if the scenes can be there, but some people will never see them. They look right through them. I mean, take your wonderful picture on the website in Street Work, where you have a photograph of, there's two men walking, one of them has a dog on the end of a lead, then passing him there's some kind of cable guy who's pulling along his dog, although in his case, his dog is a big roll of cable on a trolley, and the lead is a couple of feet of loose cable from that small drum. That is timing. Have you trained your eye to see more as you've matured with this? Is it possible to do that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of things that I see are things that anyone would see walking down the street, but they might not think that much about the arrangement of those things in a frame. Right. So immediately even the things that I see that anyone would notice, I'm immediately sizing up in a little bit different way. Although I try not to be so fixated on thinking about framing or something that I lose my sense of presence and stuff. But, you know, that particular picture you mentioned is sort of a fun example because it's a rare occasion where I saw the potential for something before it happened and followed that. So I saw the guy with the spool of cable maybe a minute before that, and I took a couple of pictures of him, but I thought, well, these are not that interesting probably. And then I thought, you know, I don't do this very often, but maybe I'll just follow this guy for a minute. You know, it didn't take long. We went around the corner onto 8th Avenue and I saw the guys with the dog, and I just thought, well, I mean, this is a gimme right here. So, you know, I hopped on that, and you know, the timing of it didn't strike me as something one had to be particularly gifted to nail once you had the idea. But that's really different from how the majority of my better pictures happen, where there isn't that kind of thinking about potential. There isn't even time. It's so momentary and so quick. The thing is, you know, I was always seeing those kinds of moments long before I ever had a camera. It just didn't occur to me that type of noticing was photographic. You know, I've written about this, that when I first moved to New York City in the late 80s, I still remember the first day of walking around as a New Yorker and just seeing all these little frozen moments happening around me. You know, in my mind's eye, I would freeze them into these essentially still pictures, but I didn't think of them as that. I don't even know what I thought I was doing in my head, but it was happening to me all the time. And then, you know, 20 years later, I start taking pictures and realize that these are the kinds of moments I've been wanting to make pictures of forever. You know, heightened moments of human interaction or of human gesture and experience.
I recently went on a street course to try and calm my discomfort with photographing people on the street, that is. But in other scenarios, I'm absolutely fine. But I was surprised to learn it's still somewhat of a problem to you.
It's only a problem if you think it's a problem. I mean, that's something that we get to talk about a lot in my workshops. Is, you know, there's very often people in my workshops who come in with that as one of their focuses. They want to be more comfortable. They're frustrated by their discomfort, or they feel like their discomfort inhibits them from taking the kinds of pictures they want to take. The bad news is the good news, which is that feeling of discomfort or fear or anxiety, it may never go away. Mine certainly hasn't, but it doesn't knock me off of my game. I am able to step forward through my discomfort and still take pictures. It's not that I am never stopped by my fear. I am sometimes. Some situations, you know, I think about it in terms of a ratio of the value of something versus the fear. So if I feel an inclination to take a picture of somebody, but I feel afraid, and then I look at the situation and realize it's just not actually that interesting, then maybe I don't take the picture. If I'm going to risk myself, if I'm going to go out on that limb, I want to feel like it's a little more worth it. Something really unforgettable and astonishing is happening in front of you. You might still feel afraid, but I mean, the value of that content is so high that you have to just challenge yourself to step forward through it.
You know, after I watched your film, the YouTube algorithm went to work on me, and the first film up after yours, it wanted me to watch a list of Bruce Gilden films, which is not necessarily, of course, an algorithmic comparison in terms of work technique or humanity. I want to say that straight away because I know you're two very different people, but more a suggestion of what others who watch and follow you then follow as well. You're both different in your approach, but you both, I was watching you, and I think you both walk with a similar fashion or purpose, it seems to me.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how the algorithms work. I don't know how many of us really do. But I do think it's very amusing how much Bruce comes up in discussions, and especially in many of my workshops, people will come in and they'll say, well, I really love street photography, except Bruce Gilden. Or the opposite, where I remember one time going to give a lecture at a school here in New York, and at the end, some people came up to show me work, and one of them showed a bunch of stuff, and I said, you like Bruce Gilden? And he said, oh yes, you could tell. And I said, well, yeah, because his pictures really, really looked like a specific kind of Gilden picture. But the thing that I feel like I need to say, and this may not really be addressing your question, but I think Bruce has done a lot of different kinds of work, and he's operated in some very different ways. And that continues to be the case. I've stood shoulder to shoulder with him at events shooting. I've been an observer at places where he was shooting. He and his pictures are a lot more than what gets put into those discussions. Now, that being said, I'm not the biggest Bruce Gilden fan. He's not one of my top 10 favorite photographers or even street photographers, but I have a lot of respect for the guy, and I think he's a lot more than what people reduce him to in those discussions. Very often people will talk about Gilden and they're thinking of one kind of picture that he makes where it's very close, very wide, flash, and very aggressive is usually the criticism. But you go through the whole history of his work and you look at all the different books and projects, and especially the kinds of things he's doing now, it's not the same as that. And so what's fascinating to me is how someone can be reduced to a specific part of their work. Now, that's very normal for successful artists, it turns out. Whether it's someone like Gilden, where the discussion gets very off topic from pictures and gets talking about behavior, or whether it's someone like Alex Webb, who is highly imitated, but usually people are imitating only one kind of Alex Webb picture. He's made many kinds of pictures, but there's a certain kind of Alex Webb picture that gets imitated a lot by other photographers. And so again, people become reduced to, a name that equals a certain kind of thing. It's, in a way, it's a sign of success when that happens, or certainly a sign of fame. And so it could start happening to me if I become more well-known. People will there are even people now who will say, oh, I took a Ruben Radding kind of picture, and they'll send it to me. And I see what they're referring to. There'll be a lot of arms pointed up in the air, and, maybe the picture will be somewhat complex and it's in black and white. And I'll think, well, that's a sign of some kind of success, even though I think I'm a lot more than that.
Come on then, what was the last book that you bought that you've only spent 20 minutes reading?
Well, I just got, a few weeks ago, I got a book called Camera in Love by Ed van der Elsken.
Right.
Whose work I really, really love. And, I probably spent about 20, 30 minutes looking through it and loving every minute of it, but then I put it on the table, and I don't think I've cracked it since. That was weeks ago. So that might have been the last one.
See, there's Project 2023, Ruben. We've got to get those books out that we've only spent 20 minutes reading.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's on my mind when I start thinking about buying other stuff. You know, I around the holidays, I made a little extra money, and I thought, oh, maybe I should buy that Gil Perez, whatever you say nothing set on Steidl. It's, you know, these 2 enormous volumes and a 3rd volume of explanation, and it comes in this fancy bag and everything. And if you really poke around online, you can find it for around $350 American dollars. Lists for over 500, and I came close to doing it. And I just thought, wait, do I really need another big heavy object here in the house that I'm gonna only feel shame about not spending time with? So I held off on that.
Well, I think the answer.
But then I went and bought 2 other smaller books.
There we go. So the answer was always yes. Well, yes for next year for that Gilles Perez one.
Well, maybe. We'll see. I have had the chance to sit down with it, though, somebody else's copy, and it is truly amazing.
And my thanks to Ruben Radding. Links, of course, to his work and the pictures. He sent 7 pictures in that we've used on the show page today. But of course, you can enjoy far more of his work by seeing it online on his website. And if you're one of our American listeners, then he does do mentoring and courses. But he did say that he intends to come to Europe very soon as well. So I certainly hope that he's going to make one of those stops in the UK. For links to Ruben and other photographers that you've heard from or about today, the socials and the websites, go to today's show page, which is episode 363 on photowalk.show, or you can follow the link in the podcast player app right now, and you'll be magically taken to the show page. Remember, we were supposed to be making the show a little bit shorter. I'm not sure how we've done. I've got this feeling that we haven't. I may have failed with my 3-word resolution, make a show shorter. But shh, don't tell my other listener. They'll only write in to complain if we make a fuss about it. Our play-out song today. So the music that we end our show with, the song that we walk our final steps of this week's Photo Walk with, it's going to start out in sprightly fashion, actually. I think a sprightly song to start the year. It's a song called Written in Our Clothes by an outfit called Giants and Pilgrims. Do you like what I did there? Clothes, outfit. I'll get my coat. This week's postscript, though, is from Jay Maisel, courtesy of Hegard the Dane, right at the head of the walk today when our boots, I'm looking at them now, I think I've picked up half the woods, when our boots were much cleaner than they are now. Some light humour, I hope. Jay said, and this is what was sent in by Hegard, Jay Maisel said, one of the first things in Genesis is, then God said, let there be light. And there was light. God saw that the light was good. Ever since then, photographers have been complaining about bad light.
This is what we wanted for so long. I will wake you early for the road. Right before dawn, you can't sleep with feet against the glow. Coming from the sun still sitting low. Oh, 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 oh. You may keep those things from me you stole. Know me, I cashed out long ago, out of any control. Careful with the highlight reels we post. Half of it's the truth and half we've sold. The truth we've halfway told. I don't know where we are going, but I'd like to go with you, darling.
That's Written in Our Clothes by Giants and Pilgrims. And that's it for this week. My thanks again to Ruben Radding. So, start of the year, be sure to send in your stories and pictures so that I can feature you on next week's show, or the week after, or the week after that. Now, it's not passed me by that numerically in a couple of editions, we reach number 365. Last year, we were running our own 365, and if for any reason you're not quite sure what a 365 is, it's where you make a picture and post it every day for 365 days. The purists will say made on the same day as you post. Most will say within a day or so in terms of photographing, but ensuring you post every day. Now, it's not the easiest thing to do because though it may sound on face value a simple idea, make a picture, post a picture, when was the last time you, say, posted to Instagram or Facebook or insert your favourite social here every single day, or indeed a blog? If you have, I would like to hear from you. Now, in our photo essays tab on the website, Mike Miller, one of our extra milers, has posted a guide to making a successful 365. And don't worry, it's only the 6th of Jan today. So if you start a little bit late in the month, who cares? You just end a little bit later in the month next year. But I'm certainly aware there are more than one or two of you who've also done this annual challenge. So can you email in, please, with your advice? Links too, if you wish to link to your own 365, so we can see what you did. But I'd certainly like to hear about your experience and your top tip or tips to make it work. It doesn't have to be a long mail. Short and sharp is just as good as well. The email address then, stories@photowalk.show, and that's the same address to use for everything, including pictures for the assignment. There's only 2 weeks really, or less than that actually, if we want to read you out on the show for the 365 feature. So can you start writing something over the weekend? Final virtual fist bumps go to Neil Ford, head of IT stuff that only works after he's given it a good boot. Emily Renier for your eyes in our Facebook group, and Andrea Gilpin, who is still Chief of Staff on the Instagram Vero and Ideas floor. Just recarpeted, actually, over the Christmas break. Also to Artlist and Epidemic for the music, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.